Good morning, everybody. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Before I say anything else, let me please thank TERI BCSD for organizing this forum. I think it is not just important, it is timely, and it's a great privilege to be with you here today. So that's already a big success right from the get-go. There's no better way to start a short speech but other than starting with an anticlimax, and so I'm going to do that right away. I have a beautiful anticlimax provided by my lawyer colleagues, and there is a prize for those who can actually read it. But it basically says that the comments I'm making today are hypotheses, are not projections that you should hang your hat on or make investment decisions based on, but it is important that I share that with you. I had intended to give you yet another anticlimax after this first one, and I had intended to bore you with a supply and demand of energy slide, which at this time of the morning was sure to put you asleep. And so a colleague of mine who is more savvy at communications than I am suggested I show you two pictures instead. And at this one I do hope you can see, although the top one from a distance looks more like a black stripe than it does like a picture of the Earth at night. Both these photos or depictions come from NASA, the US Space Agency, and they both send some very different message. The first one on top, for those of you who are too far away and only can see a black stripe, there are actually supposed to be areas with lights. This is a picture of the Earth at night, after you get your head around the fact that the world is never at night at the same time, so it's a little bit of a doctored photo. It does show you a bit of a hopeful message. It shows you what I would call the socio-economic imperative of energy. Yeah, the areas where you do, and I don't know if we can do anything about the clarity of the slide, but the area where you do see lights, and it's the areas that you would all expect, are those where economic development has progressed the fastest. It is those areas where urbanization is taking place, where rapid economic growth is taking place. It is also the areas where life expectancy is getting longer. It is those areas where we're making good progress in economic development. And so it's a message that sometimes gets lost. Energy has an important role to play, an important socio-economic imperative to answer to, because it is part of delivering the promise to this generation and to next generation of making life better today and making life better in the future. Let's not lose that perspective. But there is a flip side to this. There's another side to the paradox, which is the bottom of this chart, and that one I think is easier to read. The areas that you see highlighted in yellow are those areas of the planet that are most affected by air pollution. Yeah, and the darker the yellow on this chart, the higher the impact on mortality expectations, so shorter life expectancy due to air pollution. And this is the juxtaposition of these two pictures, I think, is an important way in which to talk about sustainability and the mainstreaming of sustainability. Because what these two pictures show is that we are indeed in two races at the same time. We're in one race against poverty, one race for economic opportunity, one race for socio-economic advancement. That is the picture at the top. But at the same time, we are in a race against air pollution. That is the picture at the bottom. This is the race against air pollution. This is the race for sustainability. And that air pollution is something I wanted to talk about a bit more in detail today. Indeed, we hear a lot about sustainability and energy, and rightfully so. Yeah, energy is closely connected to the global debate about sustainability. Global is closely connected to what Mr. Peter Bakker was just talking about really doing something now, implementation and action at scale. I love those words, and is closely linked to the way we think about sustainability. But often we talk about energy and sustainability in the context of climate change, and it is needless to say that that debate is acute, that it is important. We also talk a lot about sustainability and the nexus between energy, water and food. Also a very pertinent debate. But less often these days I hear us talk about sustainability and air pollution. And let me put that in a global context, what that really means. And sustainability, as I mentioned to us, isn't just about the other two topics. It's also about air pollution. It's about the emissions of things like mercury, nitrogen oxide, sulfur oxide, small particles that have a real and immediate impact on our well-being as society. Now, let me look at that air pollution through three lenses, just in case this is not something you've been very attuned to. One lens through which to look at this is purely a health lens. The British Heart Foundation recently published a study that confirmed that even a short-term exposure to these kinds of pollutants can materially increase the likelihood of you and I and everybody else at some stage in our life needing hospitalization for a cardiopulmonary affliction. So that is another perhaps more poignant and a very scary way of emphasizing this and bringing it home to India. And it is almost a bit shameful to talk about these statistics, but every 5 minutes it is estimated that a person in India dies as a direct result of air pollution. Every 5 minutes. So this is very real and immediate in terms of the health impact. But if you want me to, I can also put a very clear economic tag on the problem of air pollution. Air pollution is estimated, and there are a variety of pieces of research on this topic. But the World Bank, in a study published earlier this year, estimated that the cost in India to the economy is around $80 billion per year. If you look at other studies, again by the World Bank and others, in terms of what the economic impact on emerging Asia is, it is estimated that it costs somewhere between 1 and 4% of GDP each year. Across emerging Asia, that's an annual bill today, of somewhere between $500 and $600 billion a year, directly related to air pollution. These are very startling numbers. They're scary numbers. If you want a slightly less dramatic way of putting it into context, it's something that affects everybody. Us living in wealthier parts of India and Asia, but also in rural environments when you live close to industrial installations, or if you live in conditions where low technology home heating and cooking solutions are only available to you. So these are very real items. It is something that affects India. It's something that affects emerging Asia at large. It's something that also affects OECD countries, as a matter of fact. Now, let me not pretend that nothing is being done about this. There are steps being taken also in India. I note judicial action, civic action being taken to combat this. I think the focus so far has been mostly on vehicular emissions. I think that's perhaps a narrow view of the problem, and I think it deserves a more comprehensive analysis of what the sources of these of pollutions are and what we can do as society to do something about it. Now let me bridge from there to the larger problem of energy, or the larger challenge for energy. And I promised you a boring supply and demand chart. I can do a little bit better. I'm just talking about demand. But this shows what we at Shell call the energy challenge. The global energy challenge with a growing population, with the good news of growing prosperity, more and more people in the middle class, also a planet with 9 billion people by 2050. To summarize this chart in one word, or in a few words, we will by 2050 need twice as much energy as we did at the start of this century. Twice as much. And trust me, this is not a typical oil and gas man telling you, hey, the future looks great, we're going to need twice as much of the stuff as we did at the start of the century. That's not the point. These numbers assume that by 2050 the planet will be twice as efficient in using energy as we were at the start of the century. And that in itself is already a huge challenge. And so, yes, twice as much energy. If you look at if you zoom in on the electricity sector, the challenge is even larger. The IEA, the energy arm of the OECD, estimates that by 2035 we will need 70% more electricity than we did in 2012. These are staggering numbers. Now, I don't want to just come with challenges. There are some answers to it. Good news is that renewables will play an increasingly big role in meeting this challenge. Our own in-house Shell scenarios, and we've been doing scenarios for the last 40 years, suggest that by 2035 the amount of energy coming from renewables could be as much as 60% higher than it is today. Some of our scenarios suggest that the amount of energy from renewables could be twice as much as it is today. And that, we think, is welcome news. It is also an enormous challenge. Energy from renewables isn't just growing everywhere in the world. Here in India also, the Prime Minister has outlined an ambitious proposal to double energy from renewable sources by 2017. So these are ambitious, real targets that need to happen. But with that, the debate doesn't close yet. Even if this happens, and I certainly hope it does, it doesn't provide enough energy to answer this energy challenge. Now then you'll say, well then how about nuclear? Well, nuclear also has a role to play, and I think we're now over 2 years beyond Fukushima. The policy landscape around nuclear is starting to stabilize, so I could see nuclear making somewhat of a comeback, notwithstanding that it continues to be politically and societally a hot debate. It's not something that is happening at the pace and scale that was originally expected. And I think also in India, in spite of the progress that's been made on the geopolitical front, including the deal between India and the United States on nuclear energy, you can see around the Kudankulam project that it's not easy going. Exactly my point. It continues to be societally a hot debate. And thank you for bringing up that point. The impact of it is indeed that things go slower and not as big, as fast as we had expected, or had been originally expected. But thank you indeed for making that point. So what is the conclusion of all this? Is yes, great progress on renewables, possibly a comeback to some extent of nuclear, but to make the sums close, to make the equation close, fossil fuels are still going to play an important role to meet the energy challenge. Our scenarios has fossil fuels playing somewhere around the 65% of the mix by mid-century. Now in itself, that's just reality. Even with higher efficiency, etc., we will need a large amount of fossil fuels. Now that's where I do want to make a side remark, is if you look at current trends within that bucket of fossil fuels, you see a big, and in some scenarios, a growing role for coal. And that is where there is a big challenge. If you look at the past decade, you see that the majority of increased energy demand has been met by coal. The IEA estimates that coal has been the biggest contributor to increased energy demand over the past decade. Now, why is that a challenge? It is a challenge because coal in itself is responsible for over 3/4 of emissions in the power sector, and that creates a big challenge. Even if we do build with higher, more advanced technologies of coal-fired power, it does continue to be the biggest emitter. And what I would like to posit before going to a comment on other possible pathways is that we seem to be in the world, we seem to be in emerging Asia, we seem to be in India on a pathway of increasing reliance on coal, a pathway that says, well, look, for competitiveness reasons, we're going to continue to grow coal, and then to do something about our conscience, we're also going to invest a bit more in renewables. We believe that that path of coal and then a bit of renewables is neither competitive, nor sustainable, nor secure. And whilst I do not pretend to have a silver bullet solution for you. We do believe that there is an alternative where natural gas plays a bigger role that does better on all three dimensions taken together. A better combination of competitiveness, sustainability, and security of energy. Now let me say a few words about gas, but I'm not here to advertise on behalf of gas. I'm here to raise a topic for debate, which is, are we choosing the right pathway on energy? Gas does have a number of clear advantages in terms of being a secure and reliable source of supply. Gas, well, let me tell you, it's very abundant. There's plenty of it. Thanks to human ingenuity, we have found more gas than, to be frank, we know what to do with it. There is 250 years worth of supply that is technically recoverable, worth of consumption, sorry, that is technically recoverable today. If you look at it through the lens of, is it a responsible choice? The answer, in my point of view, is yes, it is a responsible choice. Gas is by far the cleanest burning fossil fuel. It emits less than half the amount of CO2 when compared to coal on a well-to-wire basis when used in power generation, and it emits less than 1/10 of the amount of SOx, NOx, and small particles when compared to coal in power generation. But gas is not the one that I'm putting here in front of you as the alternative to renewables. Quite the contrary. We think gas is the ideal complement to renewables. You are probably aware that renewables are an intermittent source of power. Gas is a flexible complement to that. Gas can be dialed up and down in a very easy way, and can be combined with renewables in a much more secure grid than any alternative. There's also more and more technology available to gas. We're seeing massive inroads of gas in road transport at the moment across Asia and the world. We also see that the potential use of gas in things like combined cooling, heat and power, district power, small-scale distributed power generation for new industrial and residential developments. These are technology developments that are highly promising. So that is my alternative, if you wish. My alternative is an energy system that has gas and renewables as its backbone. I think that it doesn't just meet the challenge of competitiveness. It doesn't just meet the challenge of sustainability. It doesn't just meet the challenge of a secure and reliable energy system. It has a unique answer to all three of those challenges, and it's only by addressing these challenges at the same time that I think we can make any progress. Let me say in conclusion the following. We talked about these two races, the race against air pollution and the race against poverty. I think there is a way of addressing both these races at the same time. I do want you to take away that air pollution is a clear and present problem in India and across the world. I do want you to take away that I believe in the possibility of an energy system that meets those three priorities at the same time. And yes, I shamelessly posit to you that gas can play a role. Not the silver bullet, but it can play a role in such an energy system. Thank you very much for your attention.